At 11:43 p.m., my phone vibrated only once. I almost ignored it. At 48, my life had become painfully predictable. Every night ended the same way: a cup of black coffee, an old leather chair, and whatever history book happened to be on my desk. My daughter rarely texted this late. When I looked at the screen, my heart stopped. 2 words, Blue Sparrow, nothing else, no explanation, no punctuation, just Blue Sparrow. Most people would have thought it was a mistake. I knew better because 20 years earlier, I had taught my little girl those words. They were never meant to be spoken unless her life depended on it, and if she ever used them. I had promised her only one thing: I would come, no matter where I was, no matter who stood in my way. My name is William Carter. Most people know me as a quiet man who owns a small security consulting company outside Denver. My neighbors think I spend weekends fishing. The parents at my granddaughter's school believe I retired from corporate management. Even my daughter only knows half the truth. That's exactly how I wanted it, because the other half belonged to a life I buried years ago. For nearly 20 years, I worked for a classified federal intelligence task force. My job wasn't kicking down doors. My job was finding people who believed they could disappear: drug traffickers, international fraud networks, kidnappers, men who underestimated quiet people. Eventually, I retired. Not because I wanted to, because my wife, Sarah, was diagnosed with cancer. She looked at me one evening and said, "Emily deserves a father who's actually home." She was right, so I resigned. 6 months later, Sarah was gone. Emily was only 16. From that day forward, she became my only mission. She never asked for expensive gifts. She never cared that I wasn't rich. She only wanted one thing: to know I'd always come when she needed me. One rainy afternoon, when she was 10 years old, I sat her down at our kitchen table. "If you're ever in real danger," I told her, "if someone is watching you, if you can't call, send me 2 words." She smiled. "What words?" I pointed toward the window where a small blue bird had landed. "Blue Sparrow," she laughed. "That's funny. It'll save your life someday." She thought it was a game. I prayed it would always remain one. Years passed. Emily graduated college. She became a pediatric nurse. Kind, smart, compassionate, just like her mother. Then she met Daniel Brooks. He was successful, confident, charming. Everyone liked him, at least everyone except me. I couldn't explain why. Nothing he said was wrong. Nothing he did seemed suspicious. But experience had taught me something. Sometimes danger doesn't arrive looking dangerous. Sometimes it smiles. The first time Daniel shook my hand, he smiled too much. Held eye contact a little too long, asked too many questions about my past. "So, what exactly did you do before retirement?" I smiled politely. "Government work." "What kind?" "The boring kind," he laughed. "I bet there's more to the story." "There isn't." That answer disappointed him, I noticed. People who ask harmless questions don't usually look disappointed when they don't get answers. Daniel did. Emily married him 11 months later. She looked happier than I'd ever seen her. Or perhaps she wanted me to believe she was. The first 6 months seemed normal. She called every Sunday, visited twice a month, sent me photos from hiking trips and dinners. Then everything changed. The calls became shorter. Her smile looked forced. She stopped visiting. Whenever I asked if she was okay, she answered too quickly. "I'm fine, Dad." Nobody who says they're fine that fast is actually fine. One evening she came over alone. Daniel was supposedly on a business trip. While setting the table, I noticed a bruise near her wrist. "What happened?" She pulled her sleeve down immediately. "I slipped." 3 words, no eye contact. Lie. I changed the subject. Because confronting frightened people too early usually pushes them away. Instead, I watched, I waited. Over the next few weeks, tiny details began adding up. She stopped wearing makeup, stopped laughing, lost weight, missed my birthday for the first time in her life. Daniel always had an excuse. "She's tired. She's working overtime. She's sleeping." Funny thing about lies: they usually sound reasonable until you hear enough of them. One Saturday afternoon, Emily arrived unexpectedly. She hugged me tighter than usual, almost desperately, before leaving. She whispered, "I love you, Dad." "I know. If anything ever happens." She stopped herself, then smiled. "Nothing." She got into her car, drove away. I stood in the driveway long after she disappeared. Something felt wrong, very wrong now. 3 months later, my phone still glowed with those same 2 words. Blue Sparrow, the code, the promise. The nightmare I'd spent 20 years hoping would never come true. I didn't hesitate. Old instincts don't disappear. They simply wait. Within 90 seconds, I was dressed. Phone charged. Flashlight medical kit. Small lockpick set. Everything fit inside the same black backpack I'd carried during my final assignment years ago. I hadn't touched it in almost a decade. Tonight. It came back to life. Emily lived 32 minutes away. I made it in 20. Rain covered the windshield. Thunder rolled across the mountains. The neighborhood was unusually quiet, too quiet. Her front porch light was off. Daniel's black SUV sat in the driveway. Emily's car was gone. That made no sense. She never worked night shifts on Thursdays. I parked half a block away. Walked the rest. As I reached the house, the front door opened. Daniel stepped outside. He looked surprised. "William, what are you doing here?" I smiled. "I could ask you the same thing." He laughed nervously. "Emily's working late." "Really?" "Yeah. Hospital called her in." He folded his arms. "Everything okay?" I looked directly into his eyes. "I got a strange text." "What kind of text?" I never answered. Instead, I noticed fresh scratches on his right hand. His shirt collar was torn. A small cut marked his jaw, signs of a struggle, very recent. Daniel saw me looking. He quickly shoved his hands into his pockets. "Construction site accident." I nodded slowly. "Of course." He smiled again, too quickly, too confidently. Exactly the kind of smile I'd spent 20 years learning not to trust. As he turned to go back inside, my phone vibrated one more time. Another message, unknown number, only 3 words. "Trust Daniel." I slowly looked back up. Daniel was already watching me from the doorway, smiling, but this time his eyes weren't smiling anymore. Daniel stood in the doorway. His smile remained frozen on his face, but his eyes had changed. They were cold, calculating. The same look I had seen on dozens of dangerous men during my years with the federal task force. Most people think lies are hidden in words. They aren't. They're hidden in timing, in breathing. In hesitation, Daniel wasn't afraid that I had shown up. He was afraid of why I had shown up. I slipped my phone back into my pocket before he could notice the anonymous message. "Trust Daniel." Whoever had sent it already knew something was terribly wrong. "Everything okay, William?" Daniel asked again. I forced a small smile. "Just spam." He relaxed, only slightly. "Well, I'm heading to bed. Long day tomorrow." He turned toward the hallway, then stopped. "If Emily calls, tell her I already went to sleep." That sentence stayed with me. Why would Emily call me, instead of calling her own husband? Unless he already knew she couldn't. As Daniel disappeared upstairs, I quietly stepped back onto the porch. Closed the front gate behind me, walked calmly toward my truck. I didn't leave. Instead, I parked 2 streets away, turned off every light, and waited. People rarely reveal the truth while someone is watching. They reveal it the moment they think they're alone. 23 minutes later, the front door opened again. Daniel walked outside wearing a black jacket, not pajamas, not clothes someone wears before bed. He looked up and down the street, then climbed into his SUV. I waited exactly 15 seconds before starting my engine. Never follow too closely. Never lose visual contact. Old habits, old rules. They had kept me alive for nearly 20 years. Tonight, they might save my daughter. Daniel drove across town, past downtown Denver, past the hospital, past every place he should have gone. Instead, he headed toward the old industrial district. Warehouses, railroad tracks, abandoned factories, a place where very few people asked questions. At exactly 12:41 a.m., he turned into a private storage facility. The entrance gate opened automatically. He disappeared inside. I drove past without slowing down, then parked behind an abandoned machine shop nearly 300 yards away. From there, I had a clear view of the entrance. I removed a compact pair of binoculars from my backpack. Most people think retirement changes a man. Sometimes, it only changes his address. Inside the storage yard, several lights switched on, 3 black SUVs, 2 cargo vans, 9 men. None of them looked like warehouse workers. Every one of them moved with purpose. Daniel wasn't meeting friends. He was meeting a team. Then, a white van backed into Warehouse 14. 2 men opened the rear doors. Someone climbed out. My heart nearly stopped. Emily. Her hands were tied. A strip of black tape covered her mouth. She stumbled. One man grabbed her arm roughly. Daniel walked over, ripped the tape away. Emily immediately shouted, "My father is coming." One of the men laughed loudly. Daniel smiled. Your father, Emily, he's just an old businessman. He can't save you. Emily stared directly at him. No, you don't know my father, those words hit me harder than anything else that night. She still believed, after all these years, she still believed I'd come. No matter what, I whispered quietly, I already have. I needed information. Not heroics. Charging into 9 armed men would get Emily killed. Instead, I observed, watched, listened. Daniel spoke with a tall, bald man wearing a gray coat. The others clearly respected him. He wasn't security, he was the leader. Daniel handed him a flash drive. The man frowned. Where are the originals? Daniel pointed toward Emily. She copied everything, but she won't tell me where. The bald man walked over to Emily. If you cooperate, you live. If you don't, he looked toward Daniel. You know what happens. Daniel lowered his eyes. He couldn't even look at Emily. Coward, Emily suddenly laughed, not loudly, just enough to confuse them. The bald man frowned. What's funny? Emily smiled. You still think I'm the biggest problem tonight? Silence. Daniel looked irritated. What does that mean? Emily leaned back in her chair. My father taught me something. If I ever send Blue Sparrow, he'll already be watching. Every man inside the warehouse immediately looked around. Windows, doors, roof, darkness. Exactly as Emily intended. Fear spreads faster than fire. The bald man barked orders. Search outside. 4 men grabbed flashlights and ran into the rain. I quietly stepped deeper into the shadows behind the machine shop. One guard walked within 20 feet of me. His flashlight swept across the wet pavement, missed me completely. Training matters. Even after retirement, while the guards searched, I noticed something else. A security camera mounted above Warehouse 14. Old model, wireless transmitter, poor encryption. I smiled. Some things never change. I connected a small device from my backpack to my phone. Within seconds, the warehouse camera feed appeared on my screen, crystal clear. Now, I could see everything without exposing myself. Daniel paced nervously. The bald man slapped him across the face. Hard. You told us she knew nothing. I didn't know. You idiot. Emily watched quietly for the first time. I realized something important. Daniel wasn't in charge. He was trapped too, not innocent. Not by any means, but someone else was pulling the strings, someone much bigger, much more dangerous. Suddenly, my phone vibrated again, another anonymous message, this time. It contained only one sentence. They know who you used to be. Every muscle in my body tightened. That changed everything. If they knew my past, then tonight wasn't just about Emily, it was about me. Which meant this wasn't a random kidnapping, it was a trap, and someone had spent months setting it. I slowly looked back toward Warehouse 14. Inside, the bald man smiled. Then he looked directly toward one of the security cameras. As if he knew I was watching, he slowly raised one finger and pointed. Straight at the lens, the bald man kept pointing at the security camera. Not at the warehouse, not at the parking lot, at the camera itself, straight at me. A slow smile spread across his face. He knew. Or at least, he wanted me to think he knew. I immediately disconnected the camera feed. Never stay connected once your position might be compromised. One careless second had ended more operations than bullets ever did. I slipped the small receiver back into my backpack. Then I looked toward Warehouse 14. Rain continued falling, heavy, cold. The kind of rain that erased footprints, the kind that hid movement. Perfect. My phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't an anonymous number, it was Emily. The call lasted less than 2 seconds. She said only one sentence before the line disconnected. North entrance. That was enough. She wasn't trying to have a conversation, she was giving me directions. I looked at the warehouse blueprint displayed on my tablet. There were 4 entrances. The north entrance led directly into an old maintenance corridor. Very few people used it. Exactly where I would have gone, good girl. She remembered her training. I circled around the back of the property. Every light inside the warehouse faced south. The northern side was almost completely dark. As I reached the maintenance door, I noticed fresh scratches near the lock. Someone had opened it recently, but they hadn't locked it properly. I pushed gently. The door opened without making a sound. Inside, everything smelled of dust and machine oil. Old electrical panels lined the walls. Broken pipes crossed the ceiling. Every sound echoed. I slowed my breathing, counted my footsteps, controlled my heartbeat. This wasn't courage, it was discipline. Voices echoed from deeper inside. I stopped behind a stack of wooden pallets. Daniel was arguing. I did everything you asked. The bald man answered coldly. No, you made one mistake. What mistake? You underestimated her father. Daniel laughed nervously. William, he's retired. He runs a tiny consulting business. The bald man stepped closer. Then, he slapped Daniel again, harder this time. You really have no idea who that man is. Daniel rubbed his face. What are you talking about? The bald man leaned forward. When I worked overseas, there was one name nobody wanted to hear. William Carter, the ghost. My heartbeat slowed. I hadn't heard that name in almost 15 years, the ghost. A nickname I never wanted, one earned during operations nobody would ever read about. Daniel looked confused. No, that's impossible. The bald man nodded. It isn't. If William Carter is coming, we're already losing. I stayed perfectly still, listening, learning. Information always mattered more than action. The bald man continued. I've studied him. He never attacks first. He studies, he waits. He makes you believe you're safe. Daniel looked around nervously. So, what do we do? The bald man answered quietly. We leave. Leave, that surprised me. Professionals don't panic unless something had already gone wrong just then. One of the guards ran inside. Boss, the police scanner picked up unusual radio traffic. The bald man frowned. How many units? We don't know. Daniel's face turned pale. You called the police? The guard shook his head. No, the bald man looked toward Emily, then slowly smiled. He did. Every eye turned toward her. Emily looked genuinely confused. I don't even have my phone. The bald man laughed. I'm not talking about you. His eyes slowly lifted toward the ceiling. No, I'm talking about your father. I smiled, wrong again. I hadn't called anyone, not yet, but now. I wanted them to believe I had. Fear makes intelligent people make stupid decisions. The bald man barked orders. Pack everything, move the servers, take the cash. Within seconds, the warehouse exploded into chaos. Men grabbed computers, boxes, weapons, documents, exactly what I wanted. When criminals panic, they expose evidence. Emily quietly watched everything. As one guard untied her ankles, she deliberately stumbled. The flash drive hidden inside her boots slipped beneath a nearby workbench. Nobody noticed, except me. Brilliant. She had protected the evidence, even now. Daniel grabbed Emily's arm roughly. We're leaving. Emily pulled away. I'm not going anywhere. You don't have a choice. I already made my choice. She looked toward the dark warehouse ceiling, toward the shadows, toward me. My father always keeps his promises. Daniel turned angrily. He's not coming, Emily smiled. Then why are you so afraid? Daniel couldn't answer at that exact moment. Every light inside the warehouse suddenly went out. Complete darkness. Someone shouted. What happened? Another yelled. The power. No, not the power, the main breaker. I had switched it off while everyone was distracted. Now, the only light came from emergency exit signs glowing faintly red. The warehouse transformed into a maze of shadows. Confusion spread instantly. The bald man screamed, "Find him!" But nobody knew where him was because neither did I. That was the point. I didn't need them to see me. I only needed them to fear me, and fear had already taken control. I quietly moved toward Emily, hidden by darkness, hidden by panic. Only a few more steps separated us. Then, a deep voice echoed through the warehouse, calm, confident, dangerously familiar. William Carter, I've been waiting a very long time to meet you.